Think we're all set now?
I believe so.
Good. Okay, well, yeah, I'll certainly be quick when I go through here, but more importantly, ask questions. This presentation specifically was catered towards the field sales, but it's important for you to know what I'm challenging them with, I guess. So hopefully I'll keep it pertaining to your positions and what you're looking at. But most of the objective is to go through engineering companies and how to think of them and to maybe help illustrate how to work with end users. This is a graphic from, I don't know, a couple years ago, a sales meeting or whatever, but it's pretty relevant to what I'm going to talk about between the end users and EPCs, and a lot of times they interact, working as the same. The end user pays the EPC to do the products, do the project, put the thing together, and then, we got a bunch of flashy marketing material of illustrating, trying to work upstream of a project, a plant, an expansion. But the wheel on the left is important because project, a lot of this is IH&S, maybe CT related. But your larger projects, I'm not talking just, buying a radiant heater or buying a tank heater. I'm talking about, putting a project together. There's a level of project management involvement. Obviously, when you're in Utah, you experience this daily. But early on, talk on the AE side of things, the feasibility studies, the feed studies, they're top-level stuff. A lot of times we don't need to go into detailed design and operation, and we'll talk about resources here shortly, and that's your resources, your time, your management. So maybe, some of this will lead insight into helping you with how you manage your time and how you support field sales, your engineering companies, and get them the right answers. So, Chromalox has multiple market chains, becoming increasingly obvious. Some companies and competitors or even products, not even heating related, out there, generally have either one or two specific chains, and because our products are used so vast in all these companies, products, OEMs, we have all these different market chains to distribution, OEM. But I'm going to focus on the engineering, end user, and how it kind of sandwiches these in between as well. Any questions so far? Hopefully you're familiar with the term EPC. There's also EPCM. But this goes to the discussion of scope. And this is what we need to learn as Chromalox to ask for more often as well, is the scope. What is the scope of the project? What is the scope of the process? What are we supplying? Are we supplying a heater? Are we supplying a skid? And it also goes, when you're talking to engineering companies, the same thing. Engineering, procurement, construction, that's EPC. The management side of that is if the engineering company has part ownership or they're going to manage it, actually run the facility for any length of time. But a lot of times understanding their scope helps us understand our scope. And sometimes in the case of an EPCM, we work with the end user to manage the project, the product. This is startup, this is commissioning, this is maybe heat trace. And identifying that becomes part of the sales cycle, right? I'm going to use a bunch of real life examples here, so please ask questions. I've had various amounts of experience. I actually started in that, most of you know by now, I was an application engineer originally. I was put out into outside sales, and then through various experiences, learned sales, and now I'm obviously telling my tale to you at the moment. I look at engineering companies in kind of two ways. You got the mainstream engineering companies, that's your CV&I, that's your Fluor, that's your larger engineering companies that everybody knows. You see the names, you see Kiewit. I left Burns and McDonald off there, but there's also where I've had success in both, but I've had tremendous success in developing these, I call them boutique firms. I get it. Not an industry term. I call them that. Some people have been using it since. These are your smaller engineering firms. These are your regional engineering firms. So I know we got people from Pittsburgh on the line. We got people from Utah. They're out there. They're not nationally known. They'll be specific to a region. They'll be specific to a market. I can tell you that the top two are midstream companies. H2W is going to be more your water treatment facilities. Samuel, they work with Anadarko. They're here locally, but it's the same in every territory. And sometimes you don't recognize the names, sometimes you do. And a lot of times they subcontract for the big guys, or they have ties to them because of liability reasons, because of a lot of things I just listed. So keep that in mind as we walk through here. And now I'm going to give an example of an engineering company and the things that you may need to know about the engineering companies. And again, remember, this was catered more towards field sales and how to develop an EPC per se, but it's important to you in the fact that don't be scared to challenge them on this stuff. Force them to, it'll make sense here in a second when I explain what I'm talking about, but asking the right questions, getting the right information. We should have a relationship with these people, and if the field sales doesn't have a relationship with these people, you can help facilitate this relationship through, the bid package, through the technical questions. Request a technical review. Work with the sales. Make a sales strategy with the sales force. Hey, you're going in there. We need to find out these things. You need to set up a technical review so we make sure we get them the right product. I use this as an example because this is I have several, but this one was one of my first, we'll say, stepping in at scenarios where, I was put out in the field in 2005 out here in Denver, given a phone and, a catalog to go sell stuff. Well, I had a technical background. I was calling on a company called Washington Group. They don't exist anymore. They were bought out, and that's a different story. But Washington Group International, they handled a lot of different products, but in this case, they had an opportunity this was actually used for sulfur blocking. And what sulfur blocking is, sulfur is a waste product in the Middle East, and they basically pump it over, and when they say sulfur blocking, it's basically the term they use for just making blocks of sulfur for transportation, and then they use that for agricultural, a bunch of different processes. But the sulfur blocking process was just steam trace. That's all this thing was a giant steam trace boiler, and they were going to build a facility for gas-fired steam trace. Well, if we had direct connect at the time, how awesome would that have been, right? So I sat down and designed this with them, basically a portable steam generator. You can obviously see the hooks there on the top for moving this thing around. And we sold 3 of them at the time. Since then, I think we've sold 6 or 7. But what I was doing, and I didn't know it at the time, was establishing my credibility with the customer, credibility with the engineering company. I became known as the heat guy for the area. And actually, the individual that was head of this project, George, still talks to me to this day. That was, 13 years ago? But what happened with that and developing that relationship, and that's what we need as field sales, as you folks on the call, we constantly, and you hear we have meetings about, calling the end user, calling the engineering companies. Developing that relationship it's not difficult. It's hard to, there's not a straight line to doing it. But in developing that relationship, just this one example, Washington Group was bought out by URS. And then from there, helping individuals on a specific basis, it kind of spawned into all those other companies by people we talk to, people we work with, and basically our credibility. And that's, you build credibility by performing, by providing them with the right product, providing them with the right answer, sometimes just getting back to them. A lot of times I didn't have the right answer. I didn't even have the right product. But I still provided the support and gave them the idea. So, I was developing these relationships, much like you developing relationships with field sales. You're developing them internally with AE, with inside sales. You kind of get where I'm going with this, right? Are you following me so far? Complete silence? Did you fall asleep on me?
No, gotcha.
All right. So, you develop those relationships, and more importantly, as you develop with field sales with your end customers, you shouldn't shy away from challenging the field sales individuals. I know, Derek and Garrison's lucky, you got Nate. Nate's fantastic to work with. He'll take you out to see the customer. And then you start to build a relationship with the customer. They know you're a team. I hope that's the experience you're having with him. I think he's pretty decent to work with.
Yeah, Nate's really good.
Yeah, and then you get to see, how's this stuff used, how's this stuff developed, and then you build your own credibility. You build your credibility with not only Nate, but you build your credibility with whatever customer you saw, right? You may randomly get a call from that individual because they know what you're talking about, and so it becomes increasingly important to build your credibility. I, doing that boiler with Washington Group so many years ago, had led to so many other people. You guys hear about us setting up lunch and learns all the time just to get exposure. There's a training aspect, there's a supporting aspect, but, a lunch and learn, behind the scenes is basically marketing. You're marketing yourself, you're marketing the company, and that's the purpose of that. What do you bring to the table? In the case of me, I was known for not necessarily following PowerPoints as I'm attempting to do now. I listened. What are you guys trying to do here? What can we offer? Maybe it's a distribution block. In the case of these two examples, these are actually specific to a process that's out in Ohio right now for midstream application. Have you guys heard of the cryo drain heater? We've sold a few of those since. And this, basically we became the engineering resource for URS. And we sell a few of them every now and then. And we don't need to get into details, but if any of you want to hear about it, I can tell you later. So, then these engineers spawn off to all these boutique companies, for whatever reason. Projects, come and go. Engineers, change ownerships or maybe their projects, they move around. So engineers get moved around quite a bit. So starting to developing my own credibility allows you is kind of the template for developing your own credibility. Again, internally and externally, but with these engineering companies, it becomes increasingly valuable. Samuel, specifically, having these boutique companies, you can drop in on these anytime. I can go down to Samuel this afternoon and ask him, hey, what are you guys working on? Okay, well, does it have any heat on it? And literally walk the room. You almost become, I've become that much of an advisor to this company that we get a look at just about anything they're working on, which is why working with engineering companies is so valuable. Samuel specifically works with Anadarko. This was a fun one. That individual, George, went and worked for Merrick for a while. And, probably shouldn't repeat this because it's being recorded, but we have Coors here in Colorado. Coors beer, you know what Coors Light becomes if it doesn't pass the taste test? It becomes Keystone Light.
Oh,
and if that's not,
am I not surprised?
And well, that's no different than say Bud Light and Natty Light. That's what that is. It did not pass the quality test. And take it one step further. If that's apparently if Keystone and Coors Light's not enough not to drink anyway, if you can't drink that and that doesn't pass the taste test, we helped develop a project with Merrick and that same George to turn that into ethanol. So, I mean, it's amazing with the different products that Chromalox has. The different, if it's done right and you present yourself right, you put yourself in position to get to help with these projects. It gets to be a lot of fun. But I encourage you to ask the questions, ask what we're working on, move it around. Another great example of this, and I had the other three listed out that tie back specifically to your credibility, your own credibility. Again, I didn't have the right answer a lot of times, but I was quick to say, look, this doesn't, let's work it out. Let's work through this. And you can do that with the field sales. You can do that with the engineer. Hey, we don't have an answer for this, but let's talk to them and work something out that might work. And I've done that repeatedly, and it's just a great way to market yourself, and it's a great way to market Chromalox because we have so many options available. Maybe heat trace isn't the answer. Maybe tank heater's not the answer. And I can't stress that enough. But in these boutique, engineering firms, it's so many opportunities for us to become those persons because, the bigger guys, they're doing so many different projects. The little niche stuff, gets sent down to them, and that's where we fall in a lot of times, which is a lot of fun. So just a quick real-life example of how that kind of develops. But an engineering firm at its core, and how I would encourage you to challenge your field sales in this is something they should be doing already. And this is what I presented to them, and this is what I'm trying to focus them on. One, you got different engineering disciplines. And, you know, I have an engineering degree. I know some of you on the call have an engineering degree. One thing I did not know in engineering school, we'll say, is what an application engineer, what the heck is that? And it's throughout industry. You know, you work on applications, you apply your product to the application on how to solve it. That's a lot of fun. I'm surprised they never tell people about that. You know, you've got the specific disciplines, the mechanical, the electrical. They also have a lot of other, we'll say, developing terminology. It's more of a marketing thing, but energy conservation engineer. I've been seeing that a lot lately. And quite frankly, we get involved in that a lot because we're electric. You don't need, you know, you don't have emissions and burners, and there's an argument of where the energy comes from. But, you know, so there's a lot of different engineers out there to call on an engineering company, and a lot of different processes to go along with that. But to break it down into simpler terms, when we're trying to sell business, right? We're trying to get projects. We're trying to get, you know, technology providers, whatever it is. You've got, you know, we'll fall into the mechanical design group, I'd say 9 times out of 10, because we're a flange heater. We bolt on. We're an inline heater. We're mechanically attached to whatever we're doing. So you know, a mechanical design department is a must. Odds are that's where our product's generally generated from, because a lot of times we get correlated as the exchanger or substituting for an exchanger. That's who's generally pushing our product. Now, the electrical department has to power our product, but we forget to talk to, you know, the process in the project, like the feed studies, like, you know, pie in the sky type stuff. This is fun to work on, and this is something you can look on yourself. You see Chris Molnar a lot of times running around, you know, emerging technologies. You know, you can always suggest stuff. You can look into, you know, thermal storage has been a big one for years, but there's a bunch of different stuff along these lines. The I&E or the instrumentation group, we forget to talk and ask for them all the time. And this is the best illustration of how our products are used. So this is asking for the P&IDs. I don't know. I mean, you guys, you could tell me obviously better than you know, because it's been years since I've been an AE. You know, how often do you actually get a P&ID for a project? Maybe 1 in 10?
Yeah, not too frequent.
Trust me, you get asked for it. If you have a process and you're putting something together, understand it, look at it. It has actually gotten me out of trouble a few times. It's actually led to other products a lot of times. P&IDs are a very important thing to ask for, I feel. Maybe you feel differently, but I strongly push the field sales to get those for everyone, because it's important for us to understand how they're using our product. In the purchasing department, I know that may be interest to you, maybe not be, but we don't engage the purchasing department early enough ever, in my opinion, and that's what we need to focus on more often. So, you know, kind of identifying these, that's easy, right? You've got your local ones. We've got all these different sources for identifying them. So, you know, you've heard us talk about industrial info. Do you guys have access to Insightly? I would say probably no.
Yes,
I'm not sure, actually. I think we do.
Some do, some don't. But I think it's important for you to understand how they're using it at the moment. So, you know, we have the extranet, and we have, you know, everything being tracked and stuff like that. So we have this other, you know, we'll say layer or whatever, where they're tracking projects. And we've done this in different ways over the years, but now this seems to be the one that's sticking. And they're being tracked on the RTSM level. Now, it's been rolled out to field sales, so field sales populates it, which is good. That's more information. But here's the thing. You can search on, you know, customer, EPC, more importantly, the project itself and the type of project. And so now this goes to a case of assigning credit, assigning support, and you can start to see the different departments and the different engineering companies working on this to the point where I would push back on the sales force to know who is the end user? Susan used in the first presentation an example of like she had a project with Technique or something, and in the end the purchase order came out of Air Products. We need to know where the stuff is coming from and how it's being used and what projects it's part of, because, you know, in years past we would be spending our resources quoting multiple projects. So in the case of the quote log on our eQuote system, you know, search and make sure nobody else is working on that same project, because if it's a large capital project, odds are you're going to see it coming from different directions and different engineering companies. So just be careful with that. Not, you know, to better use your time. There's no reason recreating the wheel, but you guys probably already have that in place to look for those anyway. I was cautioning the field sales to be sure they're populating it properly to make it easier for you to search on that. As far as setting up trainings and lunch and learns, you know, obviously I talked to field sales on how to do that. I have a template for doing it and how to set that up properly. But more importantly, if you can, you know, ask your manager or push to have sales locally. If you're in Pittsburgh, get Kelly Wade to take you on a sales call. If you're in Utah, there's Nate and others. You know, get out there, see what it's like, and especially talking to the engineers, you'll start to see that, you know, that they get departmentalized and they have such a little bit. But if you're able to explain how our product fits into those multiple realms of controls, mechanical, electrical, you know, that's you building your credibility in ways of doing things to the point you become the thermal advisor. That's what I kind of focus on with the sales force. This stuff you guys know. I don't want to, you know, I was pushing that more with field sales. How to interpret a data sheet, you know, this all leads to my discussion with them of asking the right question. It's the P&ID. So this would be P&ID for just a crude heater, right? But what's interesting is there's a lot of details, you know, of just knowing how to read, you know, temperature indicating transmitter. Well, those are transmitters. We might forget those on our bid package because it's not part of the scope. And, you know, it's really easy how they break down. I mean, none of this stuff is hard. You know how to read a P&ID. I want field sales to start reading these more because it leads to other projects. It leads to other portions of, and this is my example of this, there was a whole other circuit heater that we missed on this whole unit that was listed right on the P&ID. And so, you know, talk about increasing your credibility with the customer. Hey, you guys are forgetting this whole portion of the project. Where does that come from? So, you know, just, you know, I guess in the case of the folks on this call is you already reviewed the information. It's a lot of information a lot of times with bid packages, but the P&ID kind of summarizes it really quickly for you. Something to focus on and to ask for, and this came up a lot in the first presentation, you get bid packages from engineering companies. Well, it's important to understand engineering companies, you know, they make their money a lot of times on the engineering, their time. Think of them as like lawyers. They bill for their time. We need 3 mechanical engineers and 2 electrical engineers on this project, and we charge $200 an hour for each to their end user. So in thinking of it in that realm, what do? They generate a lot of documentation. Well, all those documents that they create, they're being paid to create these, and they exist. So field sales needs that, you know, before they send in a project, they need to send these to you. Before you evaluate a project, you should make sure that it's there. Hey, where is this document? Len's good at this. You know, he gets a bid package. He goes straight to the table of contents, and if he's missing stuff, hey, why do we not have these? Maybe it's not available. Maybe they didn't provide them. That's fine, but ask for them up front. The other thing that we need to, you know, really focus on, and I've seen this happen a few times. I've been on a couple of discussions where it's happened, you know, after the fact. All your bid packages on the engineering side, a lot of times are going to have acknowledgments. You intend to bid. You acknowledge that you've received it and you intend to bid. Are you going to meet the bid date? And I'm not saying this falls on the people on this call to fill that out. Actually, it doesn't. It falls on field sales to acknowledge we are working on that. We are going to get back to you. We're going to try. I mean, if you get a bid package, make sure that that's filled out or ask the question. Field sales, we've actually lost opportunities because we didn't acknowledge we were quoting it. And a correlation of the effect of that, we spent days with engineering quoting something that wasn't going to be accepted anyway. You want to talk about a waste of resources and frustration afterwards and a lot of finger pointing? All because we didn't just acknowledge, yes, we're Chromalox, here's my phone number, we intend to bid. You're not roped into anything at that point, but it's important to understand why these documents exist. It's a paperwork thing for the engineering companies. If they're putting together a project for a tank farm, a power gen station, whatever it is. Our heater is just one little bit, one line item of all the things they're procuring. And they send out, these intent to bids or the design or whatever for all these different products. And then they get back, a couple of them for each line item. And then they move forward from there. They've already moved off, and we're quoting it, and the salesperson never acknowledged that we're going to bid it. And then when it comes time to submit the bid, they're like, we can't accept this. We already moved on. So ask for that. If you see one of those things on your bid package, immediately ask the field sales, did you acknowledge this thing to the customer? Do it. Let them know that we're intending to bid this. More importantly, if it's, comes out the next day, you say, look, we need an extension. Go ask for an extension. We can't do it in a day. Or if it's a feed study, budget it. Pick something out of the catalog. Pick something off the website, something similar. We've got a 200 kW circ heater, stainless steel. Perfect. I could find one of those in a minute on our extranet. Find where we sold one. Great. Add 10%. There you go. There's your number. If you give us 2 weeks to work on a quote, we'll get you a better design. End of discussion. You've wasted no more time than that. And you've given them what they needed. Make sense?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. I will skip through this. I'm trying to get them to do more of that on their own. Clearly, we have the configurator available to our sales force. They need to quote more on their own and understand that. Actually, you guys are going to help me put some tutorials together for them in the future, but I'll hit you with that later. So I had a lot of discussion about the questions to ask. And these are, this isn't to fall on your shoulders as much as, field sales, they need to ask these questions. And at any point along this, project scope, there's no reason not to ask. There's no reason not to talk to procurement. If they say, well, you can't talk to procurement yet, we're just, we're not going that far. Oh, guess what? Now I know the project's not moving forward anytime soon. If it's a fast-moving project, then yeah, procurement needs to know. We need to be engaged with the procurement. Why wouldn't we be? It helps the salesperson engage the level of, where the project is, the level of interest, and what resources to allocate to that. How much should I work on this? Is this a right now project? We put this on our eQuote system. Remember, I think you've seen is PO imminent or acknowledged in 6 months or whatever. All these questions in all these different departments. It never hurts to ask. And on your side, it never hurts to challenge the salesperson to ask these questions. Where is it being installed? When? Timeline? That's a question I would ask immediately. When do you need this by? So don't be, I guess my point is to empower you. Don't be scared to ask these things. And you ask these of those departments. I mean, you say, look, go to the mechanical design engineers and say, well, I don't see a need for 600-pound design. Let's have a technical review, because now you're increasing your credibility. You're helping the salesperson increase their credibility with the customer. We don't ask enough questions. If we don't understand, you don't feel that you can't challenge the salesperson. And if they're giving you pushback and giving you frustration, then that's on them. We should want to work together, and we should want to help both sides of this thing. I got a really good example of that coming up. But, this was kind of funny. This was sent to me in a sales presentation, and it was the example of the alligator in the top left. Now, I get it's not a great example, but it is kind of funny. They ask everyone in the room, they're like, well, why is this a bad salesperson? And you're supposed to, get your interpretation, and they come back and say, oh, you're all wrong. It has small eyes and a big mouth and no ears. And you're kind of like, and you get a chuckle. But it's also important of how you present yourself. And that goes for everyone on this call as much as it goes for field sales. First of all, you shouldn't put up with anybody being inappropriate, rude, or how they come off. But you can say one thing many, many different ways, and it's all the perception of how you say it. And that goes for how you respond to others. It's not, no, you're wrong, use the configurator, this is configurable, leave me alone. It's, hey, look, maybe you work it out for them once and say, look, by the way, let me show you how to do it, or work with Derek or work with whoever. Figure it out for yourself. Just be cautious of being short with people. I'm not saying anyone on this call does it, but, I've seen field sales do, I've seen some really, I almost want to make like like a wall of impressive responses. I've seen some responses of field sales to, well, internally and to customers specifically, and then they come back to me and they're like, why are they upset? Like, because you were kind of a jerk there? There's just a way of saying things, and I think you guys know what I'm talking about, but I was certainly cautioning the field sales on how they respond and how they acknowledge people, which leads me to the end user side of things. So end users, I talked about that whole sales cycle. If you're working with an engineering firm, there's an end user at the center of that the whole time. So all those questions that could be asked, and they tell you I don't have an answer, ask them anyway. I don't know if you get a lot of pushback from field sales on this, but, I feel the level of engagement's getting better. But, you know who certain individuals are in territories that maybe don't get the right information or simply just pass along a bid package and don't evaluate it for themselves. Challenge them. Push it back to them. There's no reason why you can't. The idea is we're all supposed to learn together, right? And if they don't feel that way, then that's on them. That's not on you. Don't feel like you can't do that. And at any point along the process of any project, they can ask those questions because the end user is engaged. And I got an example of that here in a second. So you've got end users, and I kind of use this in a traditional sense, and I use this in a philosophical sense, I guess is the way I put it. End user ultimately is people using our products, but what is an end user to you? An end user could be who you're working with. I used that example of George before with the Washington Group thing. He was my end user at that point. There is no way I was working with Cutter Gas. You can't call on them. You can't just say, hey, what you're doing. And I got a few examples of that, but traditional end users are the people using our products. That's the power plants. That's the wastewater treatment place. That's Excel. That's Duquesne Light. Yes, I plugged in Duquesne Light in there. Noble Energy, Intel. We know who end users are. We know where our products get installed. I mean, we get that. That's fine. But, who else is the end user? We have the end user in mind. We know that it is, but we can't exactly work with them. And an example I used earlier, Washington Group URS AECOM, it's kind of interesting. Cutter Gas, you can't call on them. You can't just say, hey, we're approved with Cutter Gas. Now, there's some cases where you are, but it had to work through Washington Group to work with Cutter Gas. They were the acting entity for that end user. So in a lot of ways, working with Washington Group was working with the end user because they have now, they're paying Washington Group to be the representative for them. In the case of Momentum, I use them as an example. The Utica projects, you've got Kensington, Leesville, all those places in Ohio. You got Williams in Wheeling, West Virginia. Yes, I'm from that area, so I know it quite well. All those projects are mostly being designed out here in Colorado through URS, Kahuna, here locally, and we get that specified in all the time. But you can't work directly with them, not on the process side, because they're paying these companies here to do it for them. So that's kind of the end user engineering and why that's so important. I use this as another example because this one was a surprise to me. We had a specific design for heat trace with Intel, and there's Rio Rancho here in New Mexico, and then you've got the one in Oregon. That was done through a rep at the time, so we didn't really have the end user contacts, and we didn't know how to get those. And it's Intel. I mean, it's the level of security and everything like that. You're not going to get to the end user. You're not going to get to who's using the product. Well, I'm giving a lunch and learn to a company called Corbin Engineering a few months ago. I honestly didn't even know who Corbin was. This is one of those boutique engineering companies that don't come up in most of your search engines or anything like that unless you're there locally in Utah or Ogden. Sorry, Oregon. Gosh, I'll get it right in a second. And so I'm like, okay, so Corbin, what do you guys do? I start talking to them, and some of the applications and asking the right questions and having that curiosity, started to realize they were specifically contracted by Intel. This was done. So now we're in with Intel because we were in with Corbin. It's amazing how often those go hand in hand. And a lot of these end users, they don't, they have an engineering company, but that engineering company subcontracts as a real engineering company. And oftentimes it's these boutique engineering companies that I like to target. Questions so far? Cool. Another great example of this, and this one was kind of fun to work on. being that thermal advisor I talk about, or showing your credibility, Worley Parsons, you know, they're a big company. They're definitely a mainstream firm. You know, they do municipalities, they do power plants, they do, you know, large installations that you wouldn't regularly call on because they're the acting entity in the case I used for this example, the City of Medicine Hat. This is in Alberta. You know, who do you call on in the City of Medicine Hat? It's like, who do you call on in the City of Pittsburgh? It doesn't, there's not a direct correlation. There's funding, there's a project, but they have an engineering company that's doing the work for them. In this case, it was Worley Parsons. And I randomly get a call from the engineer, and his name was Anil, which is spelled really strange. Really nice gentleman. Didn't know much about electric heat. You know, having the expertise and the examples and be able to leverage our experiences kind of led to, you've got this end user, City of Medicine Hat, who has, you know, they've contracted the engineering firm to work with. I started actually sketching out the process with the engineer on a legal pad. Like, this is it. If you want to see what it looks like, you know, even though we have so many of these different products and they're all electric heaters. You know, how different can they be? So I just, you know, randomly grabbed one out of the catalog. I had a picture of one. This is what it's going to look like. And, oh, you need a duct heater. You know, that's what it's going to look like. You got an idea. We have this at our fingertips. We did not spend more than 10 minutes on the engineering design without having the discussion. Now, from there, I provided a quick quote, quick and easy. And this was an idea of understanding the scope. What are you looking for? You want confirmation that products exist. You want the comfort that we know what we're talking about. I provided both of those in 10 minutes. That's great. So we had a little meeting with Medicine Hat. $500,000 later, there you go. And that was the end of that scope. So something to think about, something to, you know, when you're going through and, you know, going to respond to someone or trying to answer a question, you know, think about what the expectation is. What are they really looking for us to provide? You just need confirmation that we're the right person? Fine, that's easy. If you need actual detailed design and engineering, we can allocate that and we can work on that. But let's establish that right away. So something interesting to keep in the back of your mind, especially when you're getting requests from distributors specifically, is this end user engineering design scenario oftentimes involves distributors, which is really odd, which is why you want to be cautious when how you quote, treat, or price the distributor. I use these two examples. You know, in field sales and Chromalox, we're out trying to penetrate, this case, it was the Alaska market for ConocoPhillips and BP. Well, we can't do that because they contract Nano Worley to do all their design engineering. Well, that's great. And that's fine. So we start working with Nano Worley. Well, Nano Worley doesn't really know all we do, and we don't know who to ask for at Nano Worley. Who works with Nano Worley exclusively? North Coast Electric. So we work with that distributor. That distributor takes us in on projects to Nano Worley, who then does the design for these other companies. So who is our end user? Well, the end user of our product is Conoco and BP, but personally, as our support and all of our efforts go to our end user, which is North Coast Electric. What do they need to provide? Do you need our expertise? Do you need us on site? Do you need just quotes? And that's something to just keep in the back of your mind. I use Border States as an example because back to the ones here locally, the Samuel and the Zap Engineering that do all the work for Anadarko. Border States Electric is across the street for a reason. They're assigned as the supply chain for Anadarko in that location. So now we support Border States Electric. We'll do the design work, and then we'll get a call from Border States Electric, hey, we need a quote for this. Funny you say that. I have a quote right here. And so now you kind of see how everything kind of ties together with the different company names. This is a great example of kind of working that sales chain. Noble Energy actually has a different heat trace manufacturer specified as their AVL. They don't have Chromalox. We've been fighting that one for a long time, but that's okay because they already install Chromalox constantly. You know, the contractor working on site is Tarpon, and some of you may have heard them, maybe not. And they do a fantastic job. And if you want to see some installation, I'm happy to send them to you. Tarpon needs stock right away. Well, guess what we don't have? We don't have a warehouse here locally. we have a warehouse in Tennessee, so we work with a local distributor, in this case Chrome Electric. And this is actually a few years ago where we started, literally Crombie started measuring our sales in miles of cable. We've done a lot of work there. And so now you see where, the end user is still the same end user, but not the support we provide. The support we provide is the Tarpon and the Chrome. And then, this one actually is more specific to you on the call. We had this project at Fluor, and the end user was in Canada. And this actually was a no quote initially because we didn't understand the scope. Field sales was not doing a good job of asking the right questions of the engineering company, and the engineering company didn't understand exactly what they were being asked to provide. So I got involved after this to see if we could kind of facilitate a solution for them. I had worked with Canada, many, many times here out west. So asking the right questions, getting involved, back to this wheel of where we're at in this thing, I was able to facilitate between Canada and Fluor. Fluor is misinterpreting what Canada is asking them to do, and in turn asking us to provide something that we just simply can't do and doesn't meet the requirements. So, asking the right questions, getting involved with the two, we established, no, actually, it's quite simple. What you just need an easy skid, and you need it, if you want to get into the details, I'm happy to get there. But more importantly, what I want to illustrate here is this basically led into over $1 million in orders, but creating that relationship. This was, RTSM level. If you work with Brian Kutch, he was instrumental in doing this. He was fantastic to work with. Because, and I pointed out before, Fluor bills for their hours. You know what they like? They like change orders because they're billing their hours. And this is something where I even learned a lot. We got 23 change orders in the end on this project. And it got to where, initially the change order would come back and we'd quote that, it's going to be another $1,200. And, so, okay, we would pass that along. It got to where, Brian and I would sit and say, how much does this cost? Let's negotiate. There's other costs involved here. There's our time. There's also the value of us providing this change order to the point where we started marking them up 2, 3, 4 times the price that we would ordinarily quote. Because guess what? Not only is Fluor providing a change order and billing for their hours, we're providing them the service to do that. So we start, we should get value for that. And that's understanding the relationship of the end user and the engineering companies involved and able to leverage that. One, it wasn't there was no gouge involved here. There was value to be had, and we should get paid for that. And that's something you should keep in the back of your head when you're working with field sales. What's the value to them? We talk about expedites all the time, and if we can actually do that, what is the true value to them? Oftentimes I explain it to the end users or, the companies that are coming to us and wanting an expedite and say, look, we've got a project for BP, a project for Evoqua. We have to move. You're telling me you're more important than them, and that's fine, but there's a cost to that. And this is how much it's going to cost. And it's not 1, 2, maybe it's 3x. Same goes for documentation. Same goes for changing the orientation of the heater, adding controls, sensors, whatever it is. These change orders can be a huge value to all of us because, quite frankly, there's difficulty in administrating these changes. So it's something I think you should push back on your field sales much harder on are changes to the scope. If it's deemed not something that it's driven by the end user or the engineering company, that's value to that's value to them. We should get paid for it. Would you agree? I would think so. So I don't know if that's helpful to you or not, but sometimes having real life examples is a way of doing that. Back to how you relay that, how you explain, what you're doing, and that's the whole perception of the value you're providing. Maybe it's storage, maybe it's documentation, and just consciously in the back of your head, there's no reason not to ask these questions. Where is it going? What are they doing with it? Who is the end user? Maybe they can't tell you, and that's fine, but a lot of times we can figure it out pretty easily. But you still should ask. It's important for us to know how they're using the product. And again, remember, this is a presentation more geared towards field sales. I challenge them that you're the end user to them. Are you not providing them support? I mean, in the end, they're using the product you provide, the quote, the design. They're using your product. You're their end user, so give them the right information. Give you guys the right information. Work with you and to help you guys get what you need. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, and I want them to focus more on working with you in the proper means of understanding where you're coming from. The tools you have at your disposal. So challenge them as much as they, challenge you. And also, the perception and how they communicate. You gotta, that's gotten much, much better over the years, but there's always room for improvement, right? And that's the same for me. I'm going down this new path of training. So I plead to you on the call. If there's something you want to know about, if there's a video you want to see, a project, an application, I'm happy to provide it. I'm happy to design it, and I'm happy to facilitate that type of training. And maybe you've seen a lot of those coming up. This was part of the field sales training, but there's distributor training that's already been taking place. If you want that, you're welcome to go watch it. It's on Team site. There's links. There's OEM training. I encourage them to use the lead module stuff. Some of the other stuff is available to you that you may or may not know. Some of you participated in them. That's great. All of these, comfort heating, heat transfer, distribution, have all been completed. The recordings are out there. Take them, watch them, do them on your own time. I'm creating videos to, how it's made, products, applications. I want to get more applications in our database of how do you install heat trace? What are the problems with immersion heaters? Those different things. And then these advanced field trainings are actually for everybody. So keep those in mind. When you see the newsletter come out and they have the invites, the idea is not to populate your, calendar of stuff you can't do, but you can go through and see what you want. But I can tell you, last week we did contract negotiation with Jeremy Moreau. That was good for everybody. This pick and ship program that Mark Wheeler's putting together, get an update on that. Know what's going on. So watch for those. Put them in your. I think they're easy enough to sign up for. I'm evaluating right now 2 LMSs, which stands for Learning Management System. You gotta love acronyms. And that'll be for everybody to get all the training that we can possibly provide and put together. And quite frankly, that was the end of my spiel. If you're still